Now, before we set about looking at how we could help Lisa, might be a good idea to have a bit of an understanding of what trauma actually does to us. Now, you could say that Lisa is suffering post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The term is not all that important, but the effect that it has on Lisa is something that, as a health professional, I encourage you to really consider looking at what can be done to remove this effect of the trauma so that Lisa can function better. It's a therapeutic process or a technique that is built on an understanding that the brain is very good at working in a sequential way. It's a self-organizing system. It knows what it has to do and it does it very well. However, there is one thing that the brain can't do very well, and that is to sequence events going backwards. If I asked you to spell the word Catherine with the letters backwards, you'd find that very, very difficult to do. You've got to picture the letters and then sequence them in the reverse order. Now, the brain can do it, but it doesn't find that task very easy. So if we have a memory, for example, that is, instead of being stored up where memories are stored, it's actually down where the everyday processing takes place, we've got a problem of distorted vision. We've got Lisa expecting another crash. Now, even if she's not in a car, she is still expecting. That level of the brain is so activated, it's as though she's walking around expecting the Toyota to hit another tree and the whole tragedy play out again. That's what her brain is doing to her. That's why she can't function properly. She's walking around with a brain super vigilant as to what could happen, a heightened sense of danger, and it gets to the pattern where it's virtually everywhere. A horrible way to live. An example I use is that my wife was driving the car, and it was during a heavy rainstorm, and she was just about to do a U-turn in a street, and the storm and the lightning struck the car, and all of a sudden the electronics in the car, they're all fried. The whole thing went dead. So she's partway doing a U-turn and it's pouring rain and there's cars coming by, and she's in a panic trying to get the car started with the ignition to restart, to finish her turn. And of course nothing would happen. Now, she explained the event to me later and she was fairly matter-of-fact about it. But actually, she'd been severely traumatized, and the way that she coped with it is to just forget about it as best you could and get on with it. However, it wasn't possible. Over time, she started to be, it was like living with another woman. Now, we'd been married 40 odd years, so we knew each other pretty well, but Robin was changing. Instead of this confident, can-do companion, I was finishing up, I was living with somebody that was severely traumatized. She lost confidence, she worried about everything. And I was studying at the time, I didn't know much about this, but one thing I really did notice was that she said one of her big fears that had happened several times, or at least every day, was when she'd come home from work, she'd put the key in the front door and she'd feel traumatized, really expecting danger. And she thought, has this house been broken into? Is there a robber in the house? Now, neither of those things were true, or were they likely. But she had this fear. And as soon as she said that, I twigged that pattern matching back to this traumatic event when she was trying to get the car restarted. The brain didn't know that the key turning in the front door is not connected in any way to the night where the lightning struck and she was trying to get the car started. This part of the brain, you could say it's fairly primitive. They call it the reptilian brain. You've probably heard the term, he got a bit hot under the collar. Well, it's suggested that this area around our neck gets heated, inflamed. You've all seen a frill-necked lizard. When they get provoked or angry, the whole frill comes out to make them look really scary. Well, in humans, that primitive part of the brain, or they sometimes call it the reptilian brain, it's a very basic brain. It's the one that keeps running when a person is on life support. It means they're not conscious, there's no awareness, there's nothing functioning up here. The senses of hearing and tasting and smelling, they're not working or not connected to anything, but it's this part of the brain that's still functioning. So it's fairly primitive. It can't tell the difference whether this event is related to the traumatic event or not. Clearly, the front door of the house should have been security and safety, a haven, but it didn't represent that. It was a place of fear, and she was set up to be afraid, and in other words, traumatized. So if we take this understanding that the brain cannot process things backwards, and we play a script of that traumatic event, and then help the person process that sequence backwards, what happens is that the trauma, the emotional charge of that event, that memory, is stripped away from it. It's an amazing process built on the fact that the brain can't carry that trauma and that emotion to that event if it's forced into doing something backwards. It's not used to doing it. So that's the whole idea of it, and it really is as simple as that. And I encourage you to try it. You've got nothing to lose. It's not as though you're tampering with their brain. You're not erasing a memory. You can't do that. It's just a matter of stripping away that emotional charge that's making this brain saying, yes, this is the same thing, when it isn't. Different time, different place. It's a different event, and it's not something to be worried about. Therefore, we strip that trauma away from it, and the memory then is relocated alongside the other memories. It might still be a bad memory and horrible to think about, but it's not a memory that influences everything else you do on a day-to-day basis.